All right, fantastic. And everybody knows this is being live streamed. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for joining us tonight. I know that we are in the process as folks are coming into the webinar, even now as we speak. They have the option, if they want, to throw their location into the webinar and let us know where they're listening in from. I was going to say calling in from, but I guess it'd be listening in now in the day of podcasts and everything. So those of you not necessarily watching, but rather listening. And we are going to be talking about unveiling the hidden, we've got, oh, gotcha. Unveiling the hidden truths banks don't want you to know and why they may not want you to know. And a lot of that just comes down to some common sense knowledge that no one's really teaching you. So we want to give you guys that information today. We want to welcome everybody in here. So I am going to introduce my cohorts in crime here as our panelists today, experts all in their different fields and industries. And so first off, I'd like to introduce the Andy McMullen, and I will let him tell you all about his fascinating adventure thus far.
Yeah, thank you, Bethany. Appreciate you having me on. Yeah, so I've been in this game. I was talking about my wife. I was telling her it was like over 20 years. She's like, that's 25 years. And I was thinking, well, if I go to the club or an event, it's like only 20 years. I try to keep a little bit younger. But I've been in this real estate game for a long time. I think I've been, we started off in the brokerage side maybe early in my career and then kind of evolved to development maybe the early 2000s. So I've kind of seen a couple cycles here. And I just think what we're seeing now is in many senses another one of those. The same kind of fears, the same kind of uncertainty people are feeling and carrying around. And I think it'd be nice for us to just kind of chop up why we should bring some of that to fore, why we've made some of the decisions over the last couple of years that we've made in transitioning from, some other asset classes to where we are now on the built to rent side. And so, I'm hoping that you steer us all in the right direction. Hopefully we'll have some wisdom to send back to you, girl.
All right, fantastic. Well, Andy, thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know, Andy is in Southern San Diego, California. So we're going to take it over now to the central. We're going to take it over to the big state of Texas, Cameron Roy, and we'll let him introduce himself here.
Well, thanks, Bethany. I'm honored to be sitting on any not call-in show, I guess, but Zoom live event or over a good drink with any of you fine folks. So I'm excited to be here. Yep, I'm Cameron Roy. I live in Dallas, Texas. I'm from West Texas. Been in the real estate game not as long as Andy. I think I'm the 5-year delta that he tries to hide behind. That's me.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm 30 years old. Been kind of in the private equity, multifamily syndication, now development with these folks game for 3.5 years specifically, and learned a lot, grown a lot, made a few mistakes, and I think made a few wise decisions and love it. Everything I thought I knew about money, just 5 years ago is kind of the antithesis of what I believe now, just through getting around wise people like this, really taking my financial curiosity and education serious, because the tens of thousands of dollars in college degree I spent didn't teach me anything about financial literacy, but a couple $20 books I bought did. So excited to just talk about some of that wisdom with you guys today. And nothing's original, so don't be impressed with anything I say. Maybe be impressed with these guys, but we're just happy to kind of share the wealth of knowledge.
Well, and even if you're young, Cameron, there's always experience that you bring to the table and everything. But one of the biggest things that I have learned is you are a student of life, and wherever you go, it shows. So we're looking forward to that insight that you offer there. So Brady on the East Coast, not quite East Coast, close, North Carolina.
Close, yeah.
All right. So Brady Hochfire, let's have you introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And, very excited to be here. I think we've all known each other on this panel for a number of years now, and always good to share any experience of just being able to talk about real estate and business with you guys. So a little bit about my background. My background's in engineering. I started in engineering, and within a few weeks, I realized I like people. So I started naturally going towards more leadership roles, project management type roles, these types of things, right? And, took that path for, a number of years, really enjoyed it. What it did, though, is it started to prepare me more for doing things outside, like business, that business mindset. Engineering is about mitigating risks, right? Real estate's about the same thing, right? In any market cycle, no matter the cycle. And so that's lent itself really well. Did some real estate back in the early, 2000s. And then, of course, everyone knows what happened a little bit later, just a few years. Real estate wasn't quite the bright shining star that it was in the early 2000s, and put a pause on it. And then it was, I'd say, a little over 3 years ago, kind of like you, Cameron, we started to look at some of the smaller apartments, and then started looking into syndications. And once we got into that path and started looking commercial, residential type properties, I mean, that was really the aha moment of, hey, this is going to be where it's at, and let's go learn as much as we can. I'd say, kind of to some of Cameron's points there, I think that he mentioned maybe was, what I think I really found, and one of the reasons I appreciate everyone on this panel, is it's really become, who do you surround yourself with? Yeah. What are the minds? What's the education from people, resources that you're surrounding yourself with? And that's really made a ton of difference. And, pass it back to you, Bethany.
So true. So true. Well, and so I am another one of the, these guys are youngsters. I'm one of the old ones on the team. So I have been in the industry well over 27 years, and started multiple businesses, and I only have 4 right now. So we're doing pretty good in that realm. But through that, it's a lot of live and learn, right? Those $20 books that Cameron talked about, right? That's how you learn, right? And then you fall down, pick yourself back up, start over again, and recognizing the value of good coaching and good groups. And through that, I've also learned the value of a good partnership. And that's one of the biggest and most important things in our business that we built our entire business on, is because we've been burned, right? You go through life, you learn a few things, and then you decide if you're going to learn from them or keep repeating them. So through all of our real estate experience, most of it has been in multifamily, and we've also flipped houses and done executive rentals and all kinds of different things. And so through that vast experience, I've also gained a lot of, don't do this mistake, learn something new. So it brings a whole different level of experience to any team that we join and come together with. And so today we're specifically focusing, this team here that you guys are all getting to meet. Some of you may be for the very first time. Some of you may not be. This is actually all part of our build to rent team. So we are working on the projects. Remember, every time you guys hear me, I'm always talking about those southern projects along that I-10 corridor. That's where these are. So we've got 3 current build to rent projects up and going, and in different phases and stages, and just under about 600 units. That's going to be all said and done here in the next couple years. And so this team is who's doing this. This is the magic. This is part of the team. And there's obviously a whole bunch of others behind the scenes. But when you hear from each of these gentlemen today, you'll see the experience that is brought to the team, but is also allows us to mitigate, because we have repeated some mistakes and then not made new ones, right? Because of that experience. So that's what we're hoping to share with you today, whether you're investing for the very first time, whether you're deciding if you're going to invest, if you're a seasoned investor and maybe scaling up from single family and duplexes and flipping to maybe multifamily, or looking to find more passive income. Whatever your scenario is, that's what this opportunity is. So first off, I'm going to thank you for taking the time, and we do want to be respectful of that. So because of that, if you have questions that come up during this webinar, and they'll come up, I guarantee it, we'll say something and it'll draw a question. Throw it in the Q&A box or throw it in the chat. One of the two. We'll be looking at those and we'll be able to see those. So put those in there right when you're thinking of it. And then if the person's speaking, we'll have a chance to. If not, at the end, we'll take that time to answer those. So we want to make sure you do get those questions answered for sure. So today we're specifically focused on the hidden costs of waiting whether it's waiting to invest in real estate, whether it's waiting to invest in yourself, whether it's waiting to invest in anything, what that hidden cost looks like. But today we are specific about waiting to invest in real estate. So let's look at it from more of that big, large scale macro level. And let's talk about all those moments of, oh no, what, I can't do anything. The feds are going to raise the rates. We can't develop. We can't build. No, COVID, everything is shut down. I mean, all this fear mongering that's going on, right? That has been going on. And I think some of it's a little bit better, but as individuals, it feels scary. So Andy, tell us what lenders are really saying and what's going on in their minds. You're talking with them constantly. What are they thinking? What do they think about build to rent? What do they think about multifamily?
Yeah, well, first off, I would say, because you and I have been in this for a while, and if we just look back, what was 20 years ago, what part of the cycle you were investing in. So whether, if you're much older and there was an 82, recession, or the 91 recession, or then 2000 after 9/11, 2001, and then 2008, where we saw the music stop for everybody. There's a couple studies that have been done over a 10-year span. So if you were just to take the two that are out there, like NCREIF, basically their real estate council or trusts, and they kind of basically say, hey, look, if you invested in, let's just use multifamily as an example, over the last 10 years, okay, or in any quarter, 10 years, right? Not 3, not 5, because you would have some big bumps, but you maybe have some pretty precipitous falls. But over the 10 years, you would not have a negative quarter. So you pick the average return, there would never be a negative quarter. So what people, when they're kind of thinking about, do I get in now, or do I get in, wait 2 years till the interest rates go, that kind of depends on your goal. Is it, I want to make a quick buck and get out of here? Or do I want to take my self-directed IRA, invest over the long haul, get in with multiple projects, not rely on the kind of, uncertainty of the stock market or crypto or whatever. I want to basically get into some real estate classes that make sense for me over time. So that's kind of the first thing that I always like to tell people so we go back 20 years, it's probably a pretty tough, 03, you were starting to see a pretty nice time to get your money in. 08 would, if you invested then, you get hit and you'd be crushed and think, I'm never going to get back in the game again. So when I think about where we were about a year ago, we started to kind of look at this built to rent maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but where we were a year ago, there was still tons and tons of money flowing into, this basically multifamily, right? Back then, we still invested in deals, and obviously some people have been, faring better than others depending on interest rates. But what we discovered is a lot of that work in that 10-year ago range was done by like the Homes for Rent or Blackstones, and they started to say, hey, can we really build out all of these units in one subdivision and then rent them like we would a multifamily project? And how would that make sense, right? Because the density is less. For those people that don't understand, typically you'd build like 25 apartment units in 1 acre, as opposed to maybe a built to rent project, you can build 8 or 9, which is great, right? That's much better than you would a residential to sale. But what we kind of discovered was a lot of that work, there was these benefits for the built to rent. So from the bank's perspective, they would much rather be pouring their money in built to rent projects. And for the simple reason is costs have normalized. So, we had these supply chain issues. We certainly had some higher costs. We were competing with a lot of the built to sellers because of interest rates, they've kind of pulled in the reins. And then we've also benefited from what we could have never predicted. Really, I don't think anybody predicted, was this huge affordability gap, which is as large as ever been in our history, right? So you've got basically 400 million scarcity of units. So there's no building. People are moving to the suburbs anyways. You've got rents in markets where there are suburbs that are growing, and you've got this huge affordability gap. So what the lenders are telling us, if you're focusing on stick build, where your costs have normalized and you've got this basically 2 years to build, while maybe multifamily or other asset classes are worrying about where interest rates are. You're building through with a rate cap through this time. And if you can mitigate the risk on the front end, like we have with some of the entitlements, et cetera, then you're much better suited to benefit in the future. So that's kind of, I want to give these other guys time, but that's part of the reason that we've started to look at this particular asset classes, because it doesn't have the same kind of hairy, scary uncertainty as many of the other asset classes do. I think you cut out a little bit, Bethany.
You're on mute, Beth.
There you go.
Yeah, Andy, do you remember when interest rates were double digits?
Yes, I don't. Of course I would never. But you know what? This is another good point. I'm gonna steal there, but I just feel like I've got to make this. Is the other thing that we're experiencing with, especially with built to rent, is now we had all of these people, and 42% of people buy their homes, right? And so basically they were refining over the last 5-10 years, many of them at 2%, right? So if you figure like the average interest rate is at 4% or 4.5%, you've got to basically think of a normal person who basically did, let's say they have, I think the average annual income somewhere in that $68,000. So their home's in that 350, and they've got a mortgage of 200,000. But when you think about, that's $5,000 a year extra that they're basically, because they've got this lower interest rate than they typically had. So they're not likely to sell. And again, that's just 1 year. So imagine that if you hold on to 12 or 13, or you got a 30-year mortgage. So now you got those people staying there. There's no supply for new stuff. And so that's why there's such this huge housing need. So that's kind of another factor when you bring up where interest rates, yeah, they, maybe they'll come down a little bit, but they're never getting back to 2% for a while. And so if you own a home, do you want to sell off and, lose out on that extra $5,000 a year that you created in savings?
Absolutely, for sure, right? On the depreciation standpoint, just on your personal taxes alone, right? Well, so Brady, that brings up a good point. Let's talk about inflation. Let's talk about how this is impacting and affecting. If people are waiting and they're choosing to do nothing, what's the cost to that?
Yeah, and I think there's a few different aspects there, right? Beyond even just inflation, because I also want to hear from Cameron his thoughts, because I know it's near and dear to his heart too, and what he looks at. But if I could kind of take just a few points, it would be, if you look at inflation, if you just look at it for the last 2 years, right? It was roughly 7% per year, right? So if you had $100,000 sitting in your bank account, you lost $14,000 just by breathing, right? You might as well gone in your backyard and lit it on fire. It had the same effect, right? It's evaporating, and that continues, right? I think, we're finally seeing inflation coming down, thankfully, right? But it's going to continue. So money sitting in the bank is the death of your money, right? It's the silent killer. The other side of that is really the question about, if I'm going to place it somewhere, where do I place it? Right. And so where is the best place that I can put it that can also, mitigate risks, as an example, right? It's not just about letting it sit on the sidelines. It's what am I going to do if it's not on the side, right? Mm-hmm. And a part of that to me is also the stability and volatility come into it. So where can I find a place that's stable, and where can I find a place that has minimal volatility, right? There's always risks in anything you're putting your money into. And I kind of go back to, mid 40s. I started putting money into a 401k back early 2000-ish timeframe. Yeah. And if I kind of look at that as the raw basis of, thought, and say, okay, what does volatility really look like? And I look at the S&P 500 as a comparison. And if you run the numbers with that, right? And if someone wants to see this, email me, right? But if you run the numbers with it, what you'll see is, for like the last 20 years, if you kind of take the compounding rate of return of the S&P 500 for those last 20 years, it's about 5.9%. When you add in fees, when you add in inflation, and when you add in taxes, that number gets squished down to 2.4%. And again, you want to see the numbers, shoot me an email. But the point is, the reason it has such a drastic difference from where we think what we think our money is doing versus what it's actually doing are these little killers called volatility, right? One year it's 25% in the stock market, next year it's minus 19, right? In some years it's fine, it's normal. So that volatility plays a deficit to your money. And then the other side of it is this inflation as well. And so where I think people need to think about is, one, if they're comfortable in the stock market, great, but just understand that there is a cost there as well, right? And for us, we actually use a solo 401k to invest in real estate, because I don't want to hang up my retirement hat, necessarily, right? I like that account. It's got tax benefits. And so we use it for other things, but we've decided to put that into real estate. And one of those reasons is kind of what I mentioned earlier is there an alternative to the volatility? Is there a place for stability? And really, putting in that analytical brain, is there a place that I can better mitigate my risks, right? Because that's where I go, right? If I look at things that are outside of my control versus what is in my control, some of the things Andy even mentioned, there's ways in real estate to mitigate risks, right? When you look at, if you're doing a development project, there's ways to mitigate that upfront risk for people such that they're not coming in and putting their capital at risk at the front end, right? If you look at lending, there's ways to mitigate that risk. If you look at, what pricing is to do development, there's ways to mitigate that. If you look at where lending is today versus where most people think it's going to be in about a year from now, again, there's these mitigations in place that we can think through and set aside intelligent money in reserves to accommodate some of that. And it's not an area that you can necessarily do in other asset classes, right? With income producing properties, it provides a very unique opportunity for us to, one, provide great returns, but two, to also mitigate known risks that are in our control, right? And I think the third part of that would be maybe just touching on a little bit where Andy was going on the supply and demand. I look at where we are today in our development, and I think the numbers are somewhere we have to build about 1 million units a year to keep up with status quo, right? To not improve, but to just keep status quo, right? And we're finally tripping over that development mark where we're now starting to close that gap in supply and demand. And I see that as a window, right? If you were watching the Today Show by chance a few days ago, you saw they did an episode on build to rent. In that episode, they quoted like 6 million gap, right? In where we need to be. I think it's a little lower than that, but regardless, there's a big gap, and it's grown over the last 2 decades, and we're just now starting to close it. And when I see those kind of numbers in supply and demand, if you follow supply and demand, your coffer will be full, right? and if you're following where the market's going, right? Interest rates, great. Taxes, okay. Insurance is going up, great. There are mitigations for those things, right? But if you look at the supply and demand trend and where we are today in the window of time that we have, I really think there's an opportunity. Yeah. And again, this is my opinion, but I really do think there's an opportunity here. And I don't think that opportunity is going to last for the next 20 years. I do think that development is going to continue to ramp up because people know that there's a demand, right? And they know that supply is so low. And we have an opportunity now for the next few years to be a part of that, right? And by being a part of it and putting our money to work instead of sitting in our bank account, I think there's good returns to be made.
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, you guys have seen it 100 times, right? If we're 20 years old and you invest $10,000 and you never invest anything else, you could retire, in your 60s and be okay. And that was the whole premise that they taught way back in the day. And we only looked at 20-year-olds going, wait, where do we have $10,000? Where does this even come from? So we needed the other education they forgot to give us, right? Which is why I'm forever teaching all of my students faithfully. There's so many ways that you actually have more money than you think, and that you can carve out money for savings, and you can carve out, and they're like, but I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I have not had one person that I couldn't sit down with right now and show them and literally show them how the system is created to help them do this. And every single time when I show them that, even these young folks, and this is where I immediately think of Cameron, because a lot of these younger generation, they don't necessarily want to buy or own their own home, but they want to own real estate. So many of them, we actually created one of our entire businesses. We shifted our business model on our executive rentals so that $10,000 investors could come in, so that they could start at someplace, pick a place and start, right? What's this look like and how does this look? But so Cameron, you have an interesting viewpoint on, just the whole lost opportunity and what's the cost of that, and what does, that look like? As a young person, you may or may not have seen that, but you might have some experience there.
Cash is trash, folks. Cash is trash. No, I'm just kidding. And real quick, Brady, something you said made me laugh. I've read and I've seen those
That
charts
happens.
as well about the average 20-year return on the, any kind of stock investment, bonds, whatever. And I think it's hilarious because they'll market them like, 8.2% or something like that. But that's not considering of fees, especially. And those times that, you may have had a significant dip in your returns and how those are compounded and computed into figuring out your 20-year average return. And so it's like, hey, 5% is better than 4%, but there's, especially in this great country we live in, there's plenty of opportunity to make 5%, a first base hit in your return strategy. And so I my wife and I, to your point, Bethany, we do rent our house. Like, we've been married for 6.5 years. Twice we almost bought a house because all that was going through my ears was Dave Ramsey. Nothing against that man. And I do think that some people need to cut up their credit cards, no doubt, today. Right now, if you're on YouTube and you don't know how to spend your money or can't try to cut that thing up, get some financial control. But, I think about people who just have a ton of money. Like, it's this older generation mentality of like, when save your money was not a bad strategy. Your returns from your banks were a little better, and I mean a lot better than they are today. But we're just not in the same environment. We're not in the same lending environment. We're not in the same environment of returns on investment in the stock market and real estate, depending on where you believe we are. But I wonder, why are people so compelled to hold on to their money? And I think it's because they don't know how to make more of it. But, money and cash is a fantastic tool. It is a terrible blanket. And so many people are keeping stockpiles of money in the savings accounts thinking that it's a blanket when they don't consider the cost of inflation, like Brady was alluding to. You're wrapping yourself up in this blanket of cash. And every day that inflation continues to outpace your fantastic 0.05, yield annually, it's like someone with scissors just coming up and cutting off a little piece at a time at that blanket. And it's enough to not disturb you because you're not instantly shocked by the cold. But if you don't recognize what's happening and make adjustments over time, you'll freeze soon enough and you won't have anything to cover you up. That's why cash is trash. And you hear people say cash flow is king, but it's, to Andy's point, whatever your values are. But I would be, a little surprised if I heard anyone say, yeah, I'm really excited about keeping my money in a place where the bank can lend 90% of the deposits I make. That's called the fractional reserve system. It's like, if I put $100 in the bank legally can take $90 and lend that out. And guess what? They're going to charge on that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9%. They're doing you a real big favor by giving you 1% a year annualized. So stoked about making 92 cents a month on my money. It's awesome. That's how banks are making so much money, is they're taking your money. This is an amazing idea. And they're lending 90% of it to other people at a higher interest rate. So, nobody really asks good questions anymore. And everybody's, not questioning the systems that they've been brought up in and raised in and are being shoved down their throats every day. And then they get to places they don't want to be because they've listened to and followed the advice of the majority and then criticize the minority. It's like, what Why don't you look at the minority that you want to be like and ask what they've done? And you go peel back their bank accounts. Is there going to be cash in there? For sure. I mean, some of the wisest, most in-debt people, based on, money that they've taken out as loans to buy assets to produce income and appreciate over time through things like Brady was alluding to, figuring out how to increase the value and keeping those reserves in place. They're smart and they have money aside in case they need it for whatever. But they're not sitting there just making their bed higher and higher by stockpiling cash. That's how an economy works. You have to spend the dollar to make the economy move. You want a good economy, you got to spend money. I mean, goodness gracious, when COVID hit, the reason I love real estate so much is our government paid my tenants money to pay me rent. Now, not all of them paid the rent, but how fantastic is that, knowing that we are investing in an asset class, taking care of asset classes that when the economy is really in trouble, the government steps in and says, here's money to pay your rent. That just makes landlords super happy. And so, I just think that people need to question things more often. And it's not very hard to do. Like I said, there's $20, $13 books out there that can help you make financial decisions. And, everybody has opinions about real estate. Great. But when I quit my W-2 job, I had some money in my 401k and I never questioned. I started questioning it. And I was like, wait, for the past few years, I've been giving X amount of money in every paycheck to some person I have no relationship with. I don't know their motives, their morals, their character. I don't even know if I'd feel comfortable with them around my wife. But that person is supposedly doing some stuff with my money that if I continue to give it to them automatically, then when I'm 65, they will have done such significant things with my money. I can go live on the beach and collect seashells. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. Nobody asks. That does sound a little silly. Everybody's like, yeah, you just invest your 401k. Why do you invest your 401k? I'm not saying the stock market's bad or your 401k is bad. Heck, Brady's got one and I love Brady. And Brady's smarter than me. I'm just saying, like, you need to have a little bit of confidence into what you're investing into. You need to have a little bit of wherewithal. Like, I don't invest in the stock market because I don't understand it. I invest in real estate because I understand it. And I invest passively too with people that I've vetted. I know the track record. I know that I could lose all my money with them. I know they can make me more money than I anticipated. But I've done the little bit of research necessary to take the risk. The biggest risk of all is not risking anything. I mean, if you're thinking you're being risky by keeping your money in your savings, just look at the rate of inflation and put that on the same screen right beside or on your whiteboard or chalkboard, depending on how old school you are, next to your savings account rate. And tell me you're not losing money. I mean, you're making a big risk by not taking any educated risks at all with your money. So I guess I'm a little passionate about it.
Yeah.
Well, Cameron, let me show you why. Can you guys see the screen? I actually have a slide here.
Yeah,
Money lost from inflation. So let me show you the first one. Here's the inflation rate from 2013 down to 2023. This is from the government site. 1.5%, 0.8, crept up. Oh, look at that. 2021, they said 7%, 2022, 8%. Oh, it's dropping back down to 3%. That's that part that you were talking about, how it's just sitting in there. So I took 2021 to 2022. If you had $100K that you left in a checking account, that no interest carrying anything, the amount of money, the first year you would have lost $7,440. The next year you would have lost again, and your total for 2 years, you would have lost $14,440 in 2 years' time, just by leaving your money in the checking account. So the risk is, by doing nothing, you are making a choice. You're making an active choice to lose money. 14,000 in this case, just in 2 years' time.
Yeah, no one pays attention to the pennies anymore. When you start paying attention to the pennies and really looking at the pennies, then you start noticing the dollars a lot more. And it's like, no, I still got $100K in the bank. Yeah, but you lost $14,000 of purchasing power. Like, go compare your milk, your eggs, your electricity bill, oil. You're losing your purchasing power. And, it's like, that's why cash is trash. It's like, cash is nothing. It's just made up. We took the gold standard and said, hey, people can't carry gold around. and go buy stuff. So we're going to exchange it for this stuff that's easier and lighter to carry around, but why would you save it when they're printing it? It makes, I mean, I got this beautiful new iPhone 14 that day. It's awesome. I traded my iPhone 11 in. Guess what? They gave me $63. I bought that thing for $1,000 years ago. You know why they didn't give me a premium for my iPhone 11? They're printing iPhones out of the factory every day. So why are you saving something that we are just printing every day? It's like this old mentality and mindset that is making people poor. It's making you poor.
Yeah. And that's what so many people don't realize. Again, why would the bank not tell you that? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because they want all your money to stay in their accounts. So they lend that out, right? Because if you've put it in an investment, they can't lend it out. A small example, very, very small. Okay. If a bank had $2 million or $2 billion in there, and using the example Cameron said, 90% they could lend out. So they could lend out 1.8 million. No, billion, 1.8 billion. Said that wrong. They could lend out 1.8 billion. And then let's just be conservative. They make 4%. Let's just say 4%. We all know between the fees and everything else, it's a lot higher than 4%, but let's just say 4%. That's money that you are literally saying, oh, Chase Morgan, I don't need this money. Here, I'll let you have it. And in this case, we just showed you 2 years. I'm going to give you an extra $14,000 so you can go basically times it by another, 40% increase, right? And let you keep it, Chase Morgan, because you know what you're doing. You're you know exactly what you're doing. I'm just a consumer. I don't know anything. So you'll keep my money safe. It'll be fine. Of course, they don't want to tell you that. Of course, they don't want you. They want you pulling that money out. But people don't stop to think about on the flip side. So let me show you this other one. So I actually looked at it from a business standpoint. So we've got a lot of entrepreneurs here on the webinar with us right now. And I wanted to bring this up because as business owners, they're sometimes so busy building a business, they're not always necessarily thinking about other stuff. And so one of the things that happens, Cameron brought up cash flow, right? Cash flow is the oxygen of any business. You need to have cash flow. But if you had an engine that was creating cash flow for you and it just kept doing and doing, kind of like what he was saying about our US government printing money, right? It kept printing money for you and it kept doing it over and over and over again. Ultimately, it's taking care of itself. It's becoming self-sustaining. It can give you your time back as a business owner. It can allow you to scale a business and do a whole bunch of other things. So in this case, sorry, I have a little typo there. I'm showing if you had 100K that you invested in any of our syndications, our average annual return is 14%. That's average. Obviously, some is much, much higher. We have prefs, different things like that, but that's the average annualized return is a 14% on our syndications. So in this case, if you invested this 100K, you had a great year, banner year for the company, you turn around and you invested that into a passive real estate and then left it. This is what would happen. You would see a 92.5% growth on your money in 5 years that you wouldn't be having to work for, but you'd also get that cash flow every single year. So that first year, it may not look very heavy, right? You're only going to get, 14K. The next year, you're getting 15,960. The next year it's 18,000. The next year it's 20,000. The next year it's 23, but it adds all up. Now, if you just keep rolling that over, that's an extra, 23,000 those first 5 years each year that you're gaining. And then you can see in the next year, it's much higher, right? You're at 30,000, 35,000, 40,000. That's covering employees' wages. That's covering an entire marketing program, maybe that you wanted to build out. Maybe it's covering vehicles. Who knows what your business is or what it does, but that covers that. Or maybe you just want to get to a point where you're, as the business owner, actually want to take some time off. and not work every single day, all day long, every single day. This is an opportunity and a way for you to do that. But it also helps you from another perspective. Let's talk about taxes, right? We all pay taxes, right? What do they say? There's two things guaranteed in life, death and taxes. So every country, right, they have taxes, and we're no different here in America. And so in this case, there's two ways that people can invest. Well, not two ways that they can invest. There's two types of investors. There's passive investors and there's active investors. So for instance, all of us here, we are considered active investors. We're on the GP side. We're the ones doing the work. We're the ones finding the deals, acquiring the deals, doing all the paperwork and the taxes and the buildings. We're making, we're building the buildings. We're doing all of it. We're doing it. So we're the active. On the flip side of it, investors that come in are considered passive investors. So what can happen is if you invested 200K or you invested 100K in 2021, one of our syndications, that next year when they got their K1 at the end of the year, they had $50,000 in depreciation. So I apologize, this says deposit, but it's actually depreciation. And so that depreciation can offset. Now, if you're an active professional in the real estate industry, it can offset your active income. So here's my disclaimer, right? I am not the certified CPA that you are talking to. With that being said, if your passive income, if you brought in 200K in passive income gains, a property sold, these properties sold, or if you're a real estate investor that's a professional, that can be active income. That 50K offsets it. So now you have 150K that you're going to pay, let's just, passive income tax 15%. So you'd only be paying $22,500. Without that, you'd be paying $30,000. So that first year you lost $7,500 right to the IRS. You literally had to say, here you go, Uncle Sam, you clearly need it more than I do. And if that's your goal and that's your business model, go for it. The government will gladly shake your hand and thank you all day long for that.
And abuse that money.
And abuse it the way they want to, correct, right? So now let's show the second year, because the second year, you're going to also probably, let's say it, we had great years the last couple of years in real estate. So maybe you had 250 that came in on those years. And again, your investments, you got in a $60,000 in depreciation. So now in this scenario, again, 15%, that passive income bracket, this is the tax that you would have paid, $28,500 if you had the depreciation. If you did not, you're paying it full on that 250K, you're paying $37,500. You lost $9,000. So between 2 years' time, you gave the government an extra $16,500 to say, go for it, Uncle Sam, you know better how to spend that money. I will let you. Now, many of us don't think like that. We don't think that we're willingly giving other people permission because we're just making a decision to wait. But that's exactly what we're doing. We're actively handing that decision power to somebody else, whether it's Chase Morgan, whether it's Wells Fargo, whether it's Fidelity, right? All the fees and everything on the different accounts and whatnot. Anytime we do nothing, we're making a choice. The choice is no, or I'm waiting, but there's always a price to that. And it could be good or bad. And as long as you know that up front and you're willing to make that, you're going to be okay with that. But what if you've never thought about that up front? Because no one's teaching you this, because the banks don't want you to know.
Yeah, they run the world.
Exactly.
It's like the rich run the world. It's awesome. So it's like they got a great model that works. And your point, no one thinks. Like everybody says, oh, I'll think when I got time. I'll make an investment when I got time. It's like those people are people who don't think. Who has time? Time has
exactly.
you. Time
I
has
think we're
me.
inadvertently making decisions because it's easy, right? And when I look back before I surrounded myself with more intelligent people than I am, if I look back before that time, right? It was easy, right? I got this wonderful machine called a 401k, and hey, my employer even puts money into it. And even, to your point, Cameron, if you look at your own bank accounts, aside from your like emergency fund, whatever that is, above and beyond that, you're making a decision either, outright, either actively or passively, you're making a decision, right? And that decision is in one of two camps, right? In one camp, you're investing money with someone, but you're not getting the return. You're investing money with the bank, and the bank's getting the return, right? In your 401k scenario, with the numbers I mentioned earlier, you're investing that in the market, and the businesses that money is going into is earning a return. You're getting some of that, but because of the volatility and all the other things that I listed, you're not getting the full benefit. On the other camp, right, or the other column, if you will, the other option B, right, scenario 2 is, hey, what if you could find a mitigation for all these risks that I know about in an income producing property that helps me hedge against inflation, because it reacts as inflation reacts. Guess what? So does the income of the property. Yeah. So it's a hedge against that. It's mitigating some of that risk, and it provides me with this avenue to, one, I can actually have a relationship with the guy or the woman or whoever is running the show. I can talk to them, in flesh and blood, and I can understand the thought process behind this asset, And, Andy, the way you describe things in the build to rent space is fascinating to me. And, it wasn't what you said today, but a previous webinar that I was on, the ability for us to, as sponsors, kind of mitigate some of that upfront risk for people, and to allow them to come in early on a deal and take the benefit of that early investment, because that's where a lot of the money's made, right?
Yeah.
If you invest in a brick and mortar apartment building that's already up and running and it's got tenants in it, there's lower risk, but there's also a little lower returns. If you can find investments as a savvy investor that's educated and is talking to people and building relationships, if you can find those investments that are intelligently mitigating the known risks that are out there and still allows you to get in very early into a deal, there is a lot of benefit to that shows up in dollars and cents. Yeah.
First of all, you guys have been a little bit hard on the banks here. Some of the bankers are my best friends. Like if you think about how we can actually use the bankers as our friends, then this is kind of the next step of it, right? First, we realize how they're taking our money, and then we figure out, hey, I think it was Einstein who said the eighth one of the world is what did he say?
Interest?
Huh?
Is it interest?
No.
Leverage.
No, leverage. Anyways, I'm blanking on it. I'll come back to me. The point of it is, I've got the bank now paying my residents, right? All of the rent that's coming in, the bank's paid for that. I put down I put down basically 20. Let's say you put 20 grand in an investment, Apple, right? You get your 10, 12, 20%. Right? I put my 20 grand in real estate. Now I take the additional 80 grand that the bank wants to give me in order to pay for this property that's now $100,000. And now any of that appreciation, compounding interest. Thank you. Who's that?
Was half right.
Matt,
but
Rakesh,
I don't think that's right. My point was that's not right. Basically, leveraged compounding interest is really my point. So that's the big benefit here is, can we take that compound interest? One side, we got basically the stock market. They'll give us their compounding interest. Great. We see it. But now let's put it in real estate, and let's take the bank's money, their 80 or 70%, how much do they want to partner with us? And let's turn that into more and more wealth, right? Brian Don has a great point. He says, you can't create wealth from cash flow, right? But you can create cash flow from wealth. And that's kind of what you were talking earlier, Bethany. That's the engine that basically turns all of this. And it's not just the fact that we can increase our net on income. It's not just the fact that we can increase our depreciation. It's the fact that we now got the bank, the loan pay down. So all that principal, now that keeps coming back to us. All those rents that are increases, now that's leveraged money. It's not just ours, it's the bank giving us the 70, 80%. That's increasing. We've got basically a couple points here on the appreciation, depending on where we are in the market cycle. All of those things, maybe 2, 3, 4%, instead of going down, like what Brady said, from like 10% down with the fees kind of compressed down. Now, basically you take 2 or 3 or 4 different ways. If you think of it as a business, how many different ways can you increase the income over and over again? And that's the special thing about real estate, that when you start playing with your calculator and you look at, hey, this cap rate, if we can increase our $1 here, we've got a 5% cap, that's $20 or $18 that I've created in value. Or I reduce my expenses by $1, I've created $18 in value. You can't do that anywhere else. And I still have stuff in the stock market, and I still like directing with the self-directed IRA, but I do think you need to have places where you can create wealth. And so, since I let Cam go on and Brady, I'm going to take just one more minute, because I do think it's important about the risk mitigation that we mentioned. Is in development, when you hear about it, what you usually think of in the development is that's the risk capital up front before you get a project entitled. And you've got some mayor who's waiting for the next election. He doesn't like the cut of my jib, whatever that is. He decides, hey, this project does not work. And now all of that risk capital is basically, that's been, it's lost. So what we try to do, as you guys know, is we put in our own money, get an option on the property, get through all the entitlements. And basically what that means is we'll go to the hearings. We've got to get county approval. We got to get city approval. They've got to basically say your project is okay to go. And then after we've mitigated that risk, we'll go to the next stage, which we call horizontal, building, where we're building out the streets and roads and utilities. So with each phase, we're kind of stripping away risk. So typically, I think while built to rent has taken a little bit longer to gain traction, it's because it still has a development connotation to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, when you think about it, by the time that we get hold of it or we take it out to our investors, it's in that horizontal multifamily phase where we're basically trying to create these communities that are a little less dense than an apartment, but have the doggy door in the backyard and the playgrounds and all the amenities that you'd have in a nice, apartment.
So Andy, that you bring up a very good point. So one of the things you and I talked about just this last week is some of the investors have said, well, what if I wait until there are more build to rents going on? Won't I get a better deal because there'll be more supply available? So as a consumer, that's how they're looking at it. What if they wait and they choose not to invest now and they wait 6 months to a year from now? What do you think will change?
This is such a, do you want to wait around and see, while your money's kind of, as Cam was talking about, it's kind of, building some girth under the mattress, right? While you could just, as Brady said, you go out and maybe burn it, or you could put that money somewhere and benefit from those 6 months, right? Put that money in now, benefit from those 6 months. Now, look, you got to trust the team. You got to trust the strategy. There's obviously factors that are involved. But to me, and you guys who've kind of seen it, we're basically going through these steps every day on how we kind of keep stripping away risk. And we stripped away 6 months prior, 18 months prior. And now people can actually come in now at terms that are going to be dramatically better than they will 6 months from now, right? And so people are still going to make a great return, right? They'd still make their 18 to 22% IRR, maybe more, a couple times multiple, or they could come in 6 months earlier where they kind of see how this is all working. And maybe now that's, another 20%, another 15%, as with development, with each phase you increase in value. So I just think people need to kind of think about the timing as it relates to development, because almost everything that we do that creates profit is on how quickly we can get things moved out of our way, whatever kind of mitigants those may be.
And also the depreciation too. 2022 was the last year for 100% bonus depreciation, and it's going to 80%, and then until 2027, it's going to scale down 20% each year. And so it's like,
Yeah, and although I'd be curious to know what you guys think, but everything that I'm reading is that they're going to push that back up. Maybe not. Who knows?
well, to your point, Andy, it's like it's ever changing and it's unknown, and it's, hurry up and get this deal closed, by December 1 or December 31st, so that we can take full advantage of this last 12 months. But it's like,
absolutely. I mean,
that's the cost too, is
deal.
Tax benefits don't just roll over the same year after year as well.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, let's wrap up with this last one of the questions that came in that I think is a very valid question. Brady, I'm going to leave it to the engineer to answer this. I'm so busy. Here's the question. I'm so busy, I can't even read the emails. I'll just know it's a good deal when I see the deal, right? I'll just know it's a good deal.
Of course you will. Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah. And I go back to, I mean, everybody's busy, and I think it is extremely true. I think it comes down to tying back into some of the stuff we talked about before. One, I think it's a lot about the relationship and knowing the people that are driving the horse, or the car, whichever. I think
Cart and the horse, yeah.
The Tesla these days, bro.
That's right.
I'm older than
That's
you
right.
think. I think it does come down to understanding the people, but I wouldn't just trade that off and say, yeah, they make all the decisions. I think getting educated is the key, right? I think attending webinars like this, I think getting educated, like we talked about, on supply and demand. I think getting educated on your favorite asset class, whatever that might be. It might be built to rent apartments. It may be anything else, right? RV parks, whatever it is. I think getting educated on that, so that when deals do come up, you can make quick decisions, right? It's not a no-brainer, certainly, right? Never just, pass it off as, yeah, Andy said it was good, I'm just going to throw my money at that. But getting that education and understanding it is key. And I look at all of this, honestly, Bethany, like, it's kind of like, we all have places to go when we get in the car, right? And we all have this favorite intersection that gets backed up. And it's one of those that it's like, man, if I could just go fast enough across, that other car wouldn't hit me, just now. And we have this decision to make, this risk versus reward decision. I can get there on time, or I can sit here and wait until it's the safest thing to do. And both of those, have consequences. Inevitably we take the risk in our car eventually, right? The other car is far enough away and we turn and it doesn't hit us, right? But it's the same in investing, right? And I think, to your point of, hey, I got an email, can I just, check the box, or I don't have time, I'll know a good deal when I see it. I think a lot of that still comes down to getting that education, so that when the deal does show up in your inbox, and when Cameron's calling you on the phone and saying, hey, I think you should look at this, you've got the background to know, just like in your car when you're sitting at that red light, how far away the car's got to be before you turn, so you don't run into the side of your car, right? Same thing with investing, right? You've seen enough of this, your asset class, your sponsor, your market. You're now educated enough that when it comes in, enough to say, hey, I know where supply and demand are. I know what Andy's track record is. I know what, Cameron, how he's looked at this in the past. I know the right questions to ask. And now, instead of it being a 2-hour deep dive into some scenario of a deal, it's greatly shortened, right? And you go to a webinar and you can make a quick decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we want to be very respectful of everyone's time. And I thank you guys so much for joining me today. I know obviously we're all busy, but in the same token, we also know how important it is for us to educate not just our investors, but those that are thinking and investigating and learning. And the teacher side of me always gets to geek out on that. So I enjoy that aspect of it. So thank you guys for taking your time, and thank you for joining us tonight on this webinar, and continue to look forward to reach out to whomever invited you to this webinar. They would be what's considered the sponsor. They're part of our team. So I know Juan's in here, Ruben, a couple of the other guys also part of the team. If they are the ones that invited you, by all means, reach out to them, get some more information, find out what next steps might look like for you. But in the same token, if you just have questions and you want to know, feel free to reach out to us at any point. We obviously want to answer those questions. We want to give you the information to make the best decisions possible. And so we'll continue to put out some more webinars out there. giving you more information, bringing value to you. And we hope that you feel like this was a good use of your time tonight and a good investment on it. And we'll look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Thank you so much, Brady and Cameron and Andy, for joining me tonight. And we'll look forward to talking to you guys again soon.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.